All right. Hello, everybody. It is December 2nd, 2021. Welcome to the IC Topic Chats for this week. We are talking about a core topic, and it's kind of a pseudo core topic. Core topics are the sessions that we are like a piece of what we would have at a workshop, and they're meant to be repeated annually. So we should be doing this every December, hypothetically. I say it's pseudo because key performance indicators, we just went through introductions, and I'm not that indifferent than most everybody on this call today that I have not spent a lot of time with the key performance indicators. I did spend time with the first one, which we're going to go into in just a second, that I heard from several people. But I guess I'm putting out a lot of suggestions of things that we ought to be thinking about, things that I want to be thinking about. And as I admitted to earlier, these are the things that I really should make a New Year's resolution to make these things that I want to do within my own firm. And I really need to be doing a better job with these because it's not just me anymore. I've got staff, and I need to be thinking about these things for my staff's purposes. And I'll talk about that while we're going through this. Anyway, so the first thing that I think we should be thinking about is the main one. If you have one key performance indicator you need to be thinking about is, are you in the black or in the red? Meaning, are you profitable or are you going to take a loss for the year? And this really boils down to you estimating what your expenses are going to be during the year, or knowing what your expenses have been, whether it's your budget or your actuals, and whether you've got anything booked up. So I would do this. I would be tracking this because I'm kind of an anxious person, really. I went independent. I had a really great job with benefits, working for a university, pretty decent salary. I thought at the time, I think I could do better now, but and I left it, and I just said, well, I'm going to go out on my own. And so there was a lot of anxiety about that, as there is, I'm sure, for everybody else. And the idea that I could actually make as much or more than what I had made in this, like, quote unquote good job was a big deal. So that became my revenue goal. And hopefully I could keep my expenses pretty low, but there are expenses. For me, it was really simple. And when you're a one-person operation, at first it's really cheap because I worked out of the house. So that was taken care of. I needed a laptop and software. So that was an expense. I needed to drive to see clients. And then I wanted to go to AEA meetings. I would eat out when I was out on the road. So these were my expenses. They were not really complicated. I had insurance. And if you want to know what these expenses are, they're all covered in, we've done it previously under the fees, calculating your fees workshop. So look that up. But anyhow, and if you want to contact me, I'll send you the links to that. But you can search it on our YouTube channel. But that's it. I mean, are you going to stay in business next year, or are you getting a divorce because your wife can't stand the fact that you lost so much money on this failed venture? I joke because I think most of us end up, if we just do some of the basic things, we end up profitable, and particularly when we have very, very low costs. Your ways to keep your expenses down, clearly, keep your salary down for the first year. Live frugally until you can afford to do more. Don't rent out an office if you can work from home. A lot of us have learned how to work from home just fine. In fact, when I think I kind of joke, as when we went to the whole stay-at-home orders under COVID, I was like, well, welcome to being an independent consultant, everybody. This is what we've been dealing with for years and years. So. All right, so let's talk about another one, project profitability. It's closely related to the profitability, but this is when you're thinking about a specific project. Really, this boils down to, did you work too many hours on a project? And you really need to have decided ahead of time, we're not talking about this today, what is the cost of your time? For most of us, it's somewhere between $60 and $150 an hour. 60 if you're at the very early stages, and it's going to take you a crazy amount of time to do something that you don't know how to do. So you really can't bill all that time at a high rate. You can't bill all that time at a high rate to your clients. So if you're figuring out how to do a survey for the first time, and it's going to take you 30 hours to set it up, absent a client being needy, just because of your own first time learning this stuff, you need to have a lower rate. But anyway, if you look at how much you charge minus how much it costs you to do this work, that's your project profitability. Hypothetically, you're not in the negative on this. And this becomes more and more important when you're realizing that you don't have unlimited time, and you want to be able to see your family at the end of the day. You want to be able to go for a walk or go on a vacation, because your time is not limitless. So again, you want to be thinking about what your costs are by the number of hours that you work. So another way to look at this is and I was looking up some different KPIs ahead of time, your project margin. So if you take this amount and then you divide it by your project revenue, then you get a percentage, and that would be your project margin, your percentage that you're profitable. All right. Again, this isn't one that I'm using, and I need to. And I intend to do all of this over the next year. Your hit rate. This is a huge one, and I think a lot of us think about this, but we're not really necessarily calculating this and reporting it outwards. How many proposals did you work on last year, and how many of them turned into something profitable? Sometimes people take these and they will even look at the amount of time spent on proposals, and so the expense per proposal. And so if I worked 72 hours on a proposal over a period of a month and a half, meeting with people on a weekly basis to talk through stuff, and all these side meetings that may need to occur, and time developing a logic model, et cetera, et cetera. That's another way to think about this. But at a basic, the hit rate is just how many proposals did you work on, and how many were successful that you turned into successful projects. When we ask what are unsuccessful ways to go about seeking out business, sometimes we talk about RFPs, which is the acronym Request for Proposals. We hear frequently that just responding blindly to RFPs that are sent your way from someone who doesn't really know you, or seeing something on a listserv I mean, there's lots of variables to this, but those are often unsuccessful approaches. You end up spending a lot of time writing a proposal that you realize that there's a lot of vendors a lot of organizations looking for evaluators who really have no intention to give you the contract. They just need two losers so that they can fund their friends that they already intended to fund to begin with. So you got to be careful with that. So if your hit rate is very low, your percentage is very low, you may want to reconsider your approach to writing proposals. All right, next one. Utilization rate. So this is just kind of, to what degree are you working on billable time? How much time are you actually working on client work? Now, I used to be in the 60 to 80% range. I'm probably well below 40, maybe even below 30% at this point, because I've had to switch into firm director role versus evaluator role, even though almost everything that we do at the firm has my name on it, and I'm the quote unquote evaluator of record or whatever. Mostly it's being done by staff of the firm, and I review it, and I know what's going on, and I sit in on client meetings, but the day-to-day activity is mostly done by my 2 or 3 evaluators on staff, or by subcontractors who may be working with me. So this is particularly a good number for you to review if you have staff that work with you. Like, how much time are they spending on other things? And you should set these as goals. Like, we want our staff. At my firm, we're definitely invested in professional development. Hence this meeting today. Tom is, I'm not sure what his role is now, but he's something with the STEM TIG, and I encourage that, because I know that the more he gets involved with the AEA topical interest groups, the more he's going to learn about what else is going on, and that gives him kind of a competitive edge. Also, it refreshes him and it's good for him. So I think that there's a lot to it, but you also don't want him spending 80% of his time on professional development. It's not a good use of his time. And then there's other things. I wrote a newsletter article several years ago that I think you need to be spending your time in 3 areas. And you can think about each of these areas for utilization rate. You need to be doing things that are marketing, and you could throw professional development even in with that. Things that are administrative, you need just the sitting down and billing of your clients, and accounting, spending time reconciling your checking account, the really fun stuff. But then the third piece, which we want to spend most of our time doing, which is working with our clients. And that actually should set the base for how you think about how you do your billing rate, because at some point you need to know what the costs are to run your business. And that's a number, if you figure there's 2,000 hours in a year, how many hours, what percentage of those hours did you actually do on billable work? What do you want to be doing on billable work? And so that sets how much you need to be billing, because if you do very few billable hours, but you need, $100,000 for your program to work, you may have to have a very high billing rate. You may need to reconsider how much time you spend on professional development, on marketing, and everything else. All right. I feel like that's one of those things where we could spend the entire time talking about just this one calculation. If you have questions or thoughts, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll either talk about them here while I'm going through this, or we can talk about them at the discussion period. Forecast rate. So this is a big one too. This is the number one KPI that I don't use that I need to, because we frequently do this. In my firm, we think about how many hours is it going to do certain tasks associated with a project. So let's just say for the month of September, we are writing our annual reports that are due in October. How many hours did we actually spend writing those annual reports? We forecasted out at somewhere between 8 and 16 hours based upon the fact that we've already done a lot of work ahead of time for each client. Now, did we actually spend our 8 to 16 hours? I have absolutely no idea. I actually could go back and figure it out, but we're not doing a great job of tracking that against it, because this comes down to how do we forecast for the future. For the next client, when we want to do this, when it turns out we were really spending 24 hours on this, then we were way over on our forecast. So you want to be thinking about that. Let's see, what else do we have here? Your overhead rate. Okay, so us university people think about this, particularly if you work with universities and they talk to you about what's their F&A rate or their overhead rate. And when they talk, and I used to calculate this when I was with a professional services firm back in the day, but you need to be thinking about this too, because this also goes into your billing rate. What are those costs associated with you doing business that you can't attribute to a client? And I am for the most part overhead for my staff at this point. That's a weird thing to think about, because I spend a lot of time doing work on the business, the billing. I'm doing the administrative functions. But the cost of this room that I'm sitting in right now, which I negotiated down to a ridiculously low rate, I'm very happy about that. But I could move into space a block away when we had an offer on the table to do this, and I declined it, but we'd be paying twice as much for our office. I'm not sure we'd be that much nicer, give us our own space, but what's the cost of your software? What's the cost of your insurance? And is it cheaper to go with somebody else? But I mean, you have to meet the basics of what your clients need for insurance. So what are those costs? Not something that a lot of us are thinking about, but you ought to be thinking about, what are those overhead costs? How can you reduce those? One of the things that I have as an overhead cost is I pay for a full staff lunch every week on Tuesdays. And I can do that because I keep our costs for our office down and I track it. I'm like I said, if we move to that other space, there'll be no more Tuesday lunches because I won't be able to afford it anymore. And I think it was like, okay, let's stay here then. So that was a good inducement for them. What's next? Oh, here's some things I didn't put in there. And these are things that when I looked up KPIs that I thought I'd put out there. Consultant billable capacity hours. So that effectively is how much time you have, that you could spend on billable time that you aren't already. So if you're doing a great job, like some of our colleagues have talked about forecasting their time out into the future. Well, let's see. In the month of January, how much time do I have that I could be working on billable time? Again, I don't think I'm not as organized as this, but I know several of our colleagues who've been on to these IC topic chats have talked about that. I have calculated revenue per consultant, and that's just a simple calculation of I identify my consultants by which projects they're on and how much revenue we're bringing in for those projects. Now, that's a really rough calculation. It's not a great one because it doesn't account for my time. It doesn't account for overhead. But what is that number? I mean, it's at a certain point you can say Tom was responsible for X number of dollars in projects compared to Amber, and she had this, and they both work full time. So is she working harder? I mean, is she bringing in more relative to Tom? Really, most of it's stuff that I initiated, but anyway. Churn rate, that is a kind of an ugly name, but it is to what degree are we retaining our clients? So if we had, and maybe this doesn't work as well with our businesses because I almost never lose a client because I've worked with them for years and years on end, but there are clients that roll out, and are we continuing to maintain them? So what kind of maintenance, I think another way we can put this is what's the number of new clients generated per year? Whereas I might have had like 4 or 5 when I first started, and now I have active funded relationships with probably about 20. Days sales outstanding. Hold on a second. I wrote this calculation down. I got to look this up. That is, that's the accounts receivable calculation. That is how many of your invoices are unpaid 60 days out effectively. The calculation is your accounts receivable divided by your total revenue times the number of days in the year, 365 days per year. But to me, it is how many of my clients haven't paid, and do I have to remind to pay? I don't have a lot of problems with this. All of my clients pay eventually. I've had one client who I still have relations with who hadn't paid me in like 5 months, but they had something going on with turnover in their staff, and their budgeting person or their accounting person left. So these things happen, but we have to rely on our clients to pay us, that we can pay ourselves, we can pay our rent, we can contribute back to our families, however you use your revenue. And then the average real fees per hour. And that's a calculation back on, it's similar to what we've already talked about. It's like your forecasted hours versus your actual hours. To what degree, if you break down the number of hours you worked on a client, and the client pays you $10,000, and I'm not going to be able to do the calculations in my head, but if you build it out at $100 an hour, what did you actually make for the hours that you contributed to that client? So did you actually make $150 per hour? Now, we want to try and be as accurate as we can, but hypothetically, we want to work fewer hours than what we forecast. We forecast as actual as we can, but when possible, if you can do it faster and fewer hours, then you make more per hour. So if your billing rate is $100 an hour, but your actual real hours is 150, that's good because you just made $50 more per hour. But I have a couple clients where I'm certainly down in the 30s because I just keep saying yes to that work that keep saying, can you do this one thing? And I have poor boundaries, I guess, for lack of a way to put it differently. Anyway, but your average real fees per hour should be higher than your billing rate if you're doing this correctly. All right, for fun, I put out some questions, and these are questions I want to talk about in our discussion. So what are some of your KPIs, or actually now that we've had this conversation, what are some KPIs you thought of during this chat? What goals are you setting around your KPIs? What goals are you setting? What did I forget? I want to hear it from you guys. And how would you calculate some of these things differently? So those are going to be for the discussion. So keep those ideas in mind. I'm going to put this slide back up when we break. But before then, I want to make sure you think about some of these silly KPIs. And I think these are, I put a question mark whether they really are silly, because I think these are pretty legitimate. Does your partner or spouse still talk to you? Or how frequently do you see your spouse or partner, right? We need to have social lives. And so we need to make sure that we're doing that. Average weekday naps while still profitable. My staff called me out on this. They're like, oh, I just heard how you take naps. And I'm like, yeah, well, not anymore. Not if you guys are calling me out, I can't do that. But from time to time, I'll have a heavy lunch and I'll sit down for about 15 minutes and I'll set a timer. And then I get back up and I keep working. But I also work weekends, I work evenings. And not because necessarily I have to, it's just that I'm just intrigued by things I'm doing. Number of elementary school lunches attended divided by the weeks in the school year. So my daughter's now in middle school, but when she went to school a block and a half away, I would eat lunch with her on Tuesdays. And I was very proud of the fact that I could do that because of the independence that we have as independent consultants. And we could set our own hours. This was Susan's that she contributed at the start of this meeting. Days you walked your dog during office hours. And then 5, the vacations you've taken per year, but as an add-on to that, the vacations you've taken per year where you did no work. So, and I feel like after a conversation I had with Elizabeth Grimm this morning, number of holiday days taken where you aren't working on proposals, because I think all funding organizations that they should, particularly the US government, should not allow RFPs, requests for proposals, to be released in the month of December so that we can all have the last 2 weeks off for the year. Now we're going to go back in just a second, but I also want you to see the upcoming sessions. Next week, December 9th, we're going to be talking about 7 ways to think and act like a rainmaker. This is a chapter from a book called, I think it's called How Clients Buy. And I thought it was just a beautiful little chapter, gave 7 items. And I think it will be a good way for us to talk about what are ways to be very effective in your business, ways to be effective at bringing, rainmaking is the idea of bringing in projects, making it rain money, right? To act like a rainmaker. 2 weeks from now, we're going to do celebrating our 2021 successes. I think this is just going to be a facilitated session. We're going to do it sort of like the way people do happy hours. So plan to just come and have fun. It's not going to be recorded. We're going to take 2 weeks off, and then we'll come back in January and we'll start with the top 10 list, core topic on why you should become an independent consultant. Plus, I love top 10 lists at the beginning or the end of the years. So we need to do that. This will be repeated from different sessions, but it'll probably be, created a little bit new. The rest of these sessions, I'm still kind of playing through. Not all of them, but we're working out evaluator replacements. So what do you do when you've been replaced, or if you replace someone else? If anybody's interested in helping me present that or wants to take on a co-host role on evaluator replacements, I'd love it. Incorporation. So this is just the idea of remaining a sole proprietor or incorporating as an S Corp or as a LLC. I'm going to create a panel on January 27th about difficult clients and what to do about them. So if anybody's interested in that, reach out to me. Elizabeth Grimm and I are working on a fantastic session, something hopefully to rival the Meet the Pros session on that we had back in November, or was it October? October, a subcontractor fair. That will be a 90-minute session where we're going to effectively be matchmakers, where we match primary contractors with people who would like to be subcontractors for those types of work. So in fact, tomorrow, I think we're going to put out an email to the e-group asking if anybody wants to be primary, and they would have their own room that they could meet with subcontractors in. And then we will do niche identification in February. So with that, I'll stop the recording and let's chat.